It's Noah's Ark 2x2 formation. Road change now. We go racing for the first time this season. 3 hours of GT action. It's go.
It's very tight as they come down. Group of cars coming in. This has all got trouble written all over it. This is G3 cars.
Drop downhill there, head towards the Aqua Minerale. Imola, of course. There's another one off through the gravel. As wide as possible as they drop downhill, put it back from the inside line. Yes, he did. Through he goes.
Good evening everybody and welcome back to another Apex Online Racing stream here for the season opener for Tier 2 in Season X of the Apex Online Racing GT3 League here on Assetto Corsa Competizione. Yesterday night we had the action from all of the drivers from Tier 1, and this evening Tier 2 are going to give it their best shot to see what sort of action and racing they can provide. Unfortunately, Tim won't be joining me tonight. He is unfortunately suffering a little bit voice-wise, and I believe has also got to go pick up his partner as well. So it will be just me for this evening, but we shall have an enjoyable stream nonetheless, I have no doubt. Now, to give a little bit of context going into this race, Misano once again this evening, of course, and just a little quick note, interestingly, look at that weather icon at the top of the screen. In this practice session, in 10 minutes time, there would be rain. Now in Tier 1 yesterday, that was not an element that these drivers had to really factor into their strategies, or really have any sort of consideration towards, really. It was very much a dry race through and through, but this just maybe gives these drivers something to potentially worry about and factor in to the equation. How much time do you spend on a setup? How much time do you spend trying to adapt the way that you drive into these sorts of conditions? So that'll be a little bit of a worry for these guys going into qualifying very, very shortly. Looking at the current sort of practice leaderboard that we have for the time being, as we have Andre McClear pulling over to the side there. Once again, a very nice mix of cars within the top 10. But interestingly enough, once again, generally a large proportion of Porsches than any other manufacturer. Now, we saw Luke Whitehead yesterday put on an absolutely astonishing showcase of defence against the two almighty Bentleys of Valentine Barrier and Igor Ognorokov in that race. And against all of the odds and that straight line speed advantage that the Bentleys have, he was able to make that Porsche work, extract every single ounce of pace that he could from it, and there we go, it is raining for qualifying. So, as already some comments in the in-game chat of an oh dear, and, well, a little bit of an oh dear potentially indeed. How much of these Tier 2 guys prepared for these conditions? This could give us a very exciting race indeed. So to finish off that sort of point, in the Porsche that Luke was driving, you could see how much he struggled down the back straight and how much of an opportunity it gave to the cars behind him to try to make an overtake. looking at the grid that we've got for Tier 2 today, that might not be exactly the same way that things work out as they did yesterday evening, because generally speaking, by the looks of it, the fastest guys that we've got in Tier 2, we're seeing some very strong candidates in the Porsches, the Audis and the Hondas around here. So that's something to really watch out for. The Honda is almighty down the back straight, maybe not quite as much as the Bentley, but similar sort of notion for the Audi as well. It's got a decent amount of grunt, but with the weather being the way that it is, and this rain is going to stick with us all the way through this qualifying session, that is really going to factor in to maybe shuffling this grid around to see who's going to end up on pole position. So a really, really interesting way to get underway with this session, and we'll have the first bit of wet weather for Season X already, which is wonderful news. Rain does always tend to bring some additional excitement and drama with any race that we have had, so things to look forward to there. Also, to have a look through some of the drivers whilst these guys are completing their outlaps. We've got some names that will be familiar to some of you who watched Tier 2 last season. We've got the likes of Christian Steinhauser having switched over to the Bentley now. We've also got Robin Moe, a very, very fast driver in the recent BMW M2 series, and he'll be looking to put on a good show in the McLaren. We've also got the likes of Ben Keys, one of our few Nissan GTRs that are being represented, so good to see at least one in. I think Ben might be the only driver in the top 2 tiers to be driving the Nissan GTR, so a good thing from him there. Nice to see that car being shown off as well. We've got Christos Joguk, another driver from the BMW M2 series, sitting in Tier 2. Ola Pitchik in an absolutely beautiful livery Audi there. Fantastic looking car. Trying to see if we can get a better angle of that. Cameras aren't always too conducive, but a lovely, lovely livery on that car. I think another car that I've seen in practice that had a very nice livery, there was an NXT Gen livery on a Bentley, I believe, and I'm trying to remember who that belonged to. We'll see if we can come across it at some point. I know somebody who has also got another nice livery, and another familiar face is Matt York, driving the BMW this season for York Sports Racing, with another nice livery on that car. We'll have to keep an eye out for that Bentley as well, because there is a very nice looking Bentley somewhere amongst this field. And also some other familiar names. We've got James Cowley driving the BMW this season, Jay Fang, Trafka from BMW M2 series, we've got Remy Papin, who has been in Tier 2 before, Daniel Pashkar, a driver that's been doing very well in some of the endurance races, with a very nice livery on that Audi. Looks quite inspired by the sort of vintage 1990s McLaren F1s in the GT1 category, so nice livery on that car. Also got Yuko Terminen in the Lexus, I think maybe our sole representative, bit like the Nissan GTR. I think this might be the only Lexus in the top 2 tiers, so good to see that car being represented as well. That could do fairly well around here if the weather goes back to dry. Got Mr. Jones in the Aston Martin. Very few Aston Martins this season, which in contrast to a couple of seasons ago when the BOP was really favouring this car. It's unusual to see such a low uptake of the Aston, so he'll be looking to do something special with that if he can. And then also Jan Climbs, a previous Tier 2 driver as well. So we've got a few familiar faces within this grid, but the first lots of lap times are coming through at the moment. Top of the timesheet is Sem Smeets in the McLaren, 141.030, only 0.05 of a second ahead of this man Daniel Pashkar in that lost in pace Audi. Well, certainly not losing much pace at the moment. Who else have we got that is on a good lap? We've got the likes of Benji McCluskey is... Oh, there's that Bentley. As it turns out, Benjamin McCluskey is on a flyer at the moment. He is on a big, big improvement that can see him jump up all the way to one of those top 2 rows on the grid. And that's the Bentley I was talking about. Look at that. That is a wonderful, wonderful livery on that car as well. We had some nice liveries in Tier 1 yesterday, of course, too, but a couple of really nice standouts here in Tier 2 tonight. People being very, very creative in putting these designs together, so very nice to see those. Benji over a second up on his previous time. This could be an absolute belter of a lap if he brings this one to the line, and it will be provisional pole on a 40.857, the first man to break into the 40s, and does that one extremely well. Bentley then showing good pace in not just the dry but the wet too, and we know the Bentley is an exceptional race car around here, so if Benji can start on pole position, the likes of any Porsches that might be around the pointy end of the grid might really struggle to make progress through the field and challenge for the win, even if they do have the ultimate outright pace in the race. So McCluskey goes to provisional pole. We've also got a tie on lap times for P2. Don't see that very often. Both Andre McClear and Guillaume Verdier in the 882 Porsche, lead Porsche in the tier on a 41.015. Very interesting contrasting sectors. That Porsche exceptionally quick in the first sector, we know that, and is almost 0.4 of a second clear of anything else in the top 10, but then loses out in the next couple of sectors, and there's a big part of that that is solely down to straight line speed, and that's something that in the Porsche is almost impossible to tune out of the car. It's, even with all of the best setup knowledge in the world, it's very difficult to find any additional top speed, but my goodness, we are seeing some fast times now. Christos Jogurk in the wonderful SpongeBob liveried Audi there goes on a 40.4, absolutely smashes everyone else out of the park, and Gasper Mrak in the Honda sits in provisional P2 on a 40.7, so a good effort from him. Let's go on board with somebody to see what it's like driving in these conditions. Got Remy Rose currently 0.2 of a second up on their previous best in the Honda, hearing that very distinct engine tone of the Honda roaring down this back straight into turn 8, trying to get as much into the apex as possible there, because there is just a bit of camber that really helps pull you around. Now tricky braking zone through 9 and then into 10, taking a very wide line on entry. Will look try to get back towards the apex, doesn't quite manage it, but does get reasonable drive past, big kick of oversteer on the exit curve. Got to be so careful in these wet conditions. Traction is everything, and then you lose all of that momentum down this back straight through the first kink of 11, still flat even in the wet. Now even trickier than normal, 12 and 13 through here. We saw cars getting very unstable before, and it's so slippery in these conditions. Remy doing a fantastic job there, hooked up all over the apex of 14 on the power as quick as they can for heading into 15. Use a little bit of the exit curve, got to be careful not to dip a wheel onto the grass, down a couple of gears and into the final corner, and we'll try to get on the power as quick as possible. Another kick of oversteer before running towards the line, and for Remy it will be a 41.3, so no improvement there for the Honda just yet, but you can just see how treacherous it is for these guys trying to tackle these conditions, and this is very unfamiliar territory for a lot of them. Misano, the weather was very much expected to be like Tier 1, high chance of being dry, but there was just that chance of changeable conditions, and that's what we're seeing here in the qualifying session, and whether or not that translates to the race, we shall have to wait and see. Who else is going quickly? Gasper is on an improvement for the time being, has found a 10th in the first corner. A little bit of a slide on the exit of turn 3 and then down towards the braking zone of 4. Very tricky to not run too deep, especially in these wet conditions. Now try to get a nice smooth set of lines here and really have to be patient. Oh, that may be an invalidation for Gasper there. We will have to see, as another contester for pole position. Mr. Jones sends that Aston Martin to the top of the timesheets on a 40.3. So the Aston Martin working very nicely, seemingly in these wet conditions, and it may take wet conditions to make this car particularly competitive around here at Misano. Not a track that the Aston particularly lends itself well to, because it's a little bit on the heavy side. It does well in high-speed corners, but in the sort of slow corners where then you're relying on acceleration and grunt doesn't quite have the same sort of pace that it used to, and it's always a car that struggled in acceleration anyway. But in wet conditions and in the hands of Mr. Jones, putting together a very nice crack for pole position so far. However, in the meantime, someone that might be having something to say about that is Krzysztof Jogok. He is 0.3 of a second up, and if he keeps on finding pace in his lap, there's even a chance this could break into the 49s. Very nicely through there, using all of the latest upgrades on that Audi Aero package. This is the Evo 2 car, remember, recent addition to ACC. Has lost a bit of time though through that final part of the lap, so he's down to only a 10th improvement now. This may not quite be enough unless he gets it together. Oh, kick over the curb. He's going to be losing pace down that back straight. I don't think it's going to quite be enough. It's not even an improvement. He ends up 0.005 of a second off his previous time. Gasper Mrak, he is on a better lap as well. Still has quite a way to go. Remy has found some time, moving themselves up to P6. Currently 0.2 of a second up on their previous best as well. That could see them get into the top 3 potentially. Jogok, though, has already found almost half a second in this opening sector, so Jogok definitely not out of the question for pole position just yet. Let's see where the likes of Remy is. So where is Remy on the lap? Remy coming into the final corner now. Oh, big slide! And that is off the track. 4717 car will... Oh, that was very poor decision there from Remy, unfortunately. And poor Matt York, absolute innocent bystander there, gets completely collected by the Audi in front. So we'll hop on board with Matt there. See from his perspective, but Remy just carried a bit too much speed into the final corner, lost it, and didn't quite check their track map properly. Tried to get off the racing line out of the way, and instead, poor Matt York just got absolutely T-boned through the final corner there. So very unfortunate for Matt York. Have to see, though, in these final moments who is going quickly. Gasper Mrak has found some time. They are up to P1 for the time being on a 40.267. Jogok, we know that Jogok has pace in that car, is consistently finding time in the opening sector, but just unable to put it all together. So these conditions, very tricky at the moment for these guys. Damp conditions, maybe struggling to find a nice point with the tyre pressures, with the brakes. Sometimes these damp conditions can actually be trickier than full-on wet conditions, because you're in a little bit of a half and half situation with where you take the car, how you drive the car, and that can make it oh so difficult for these guys. Gasper, though, still on the improvement. The Audi getting a little bit in the way on the exit, but still carrying good speed down the back straight. And again, this could be a strong lap from Gasper to maybe break into the 39s. How brave is Gasper going to be through 12 and 13? You see all of the tiny corrections through that series of corners, but beautifully drifts it through. That gets it nicely stopped and tucked into the apex of 14. Swing it back across for 15. Take as much apex as you dare. Run out wide, but try not to lose the car on the exit. This is where Remy and Honda lost it a moment ago. No such issues for Gasper. Beautifully controlled on the exit. I think he might find a 10th towards the line. May have actually lost it. Oh, but he does improve by just a small amount of 40.2. That'll be Gasper's final effort there from him. Now, where is Mr. Jones? Mr. Jones, not an improvement right now, but will get one more lap to go if they have a fuel for it. A late addition to the front-running guys, Uros Yelenko in the 17 Honda. So Honda's looking very quick around here. Currently in P4 now, as David Gavon in the Bentley has put themselves up to P3, but Uros 0.2 of a second up on their best time as well, so could still be having something to say about the front row. And Mr. Jones is also going very quickly, so we'll have to see how all these guys put their lap together. Jogok, though, into the pit lane, so no further improvements for him. Think he must have had the pace potentially for pole there, but just could not quite put it together, so it's going to go to one of the other drivers. Who else have we got improving at the moment? We've got Jay Fang down in P18. Couple of tenths up that can see them potentially break in towards the top 10. Oh, Urisalenko going very, very wide on the exit of 13, so that will be it for them. But the man who is on a charge potentially at the moment, Mr. Jones, was 0.2 of a second. Maybe a slight commentator curse from me there, though, because I think he went deep going into turn 10. A very, very tricky braking zone. And I'm not sure he's going to be able to recover that time in the final sector unless he can do something particularly spectacular. It doesn't look like anyone else is particularly finding time to challenge pole either, and that's Mr. Jones off as well, 12 of 13, continuing to find victims in the late stage of this qualifying session. We've got Damien Lillian all the way down in 29th at the moment, currently a 1/10 of a second up, still tied with Andre Leclerc on lap times at the moment. Haven't been able to improve from the 41.015 from earlier. Damien, though, neat and tidy on the exit of turn 10. Looking to see if he can bring this one home for a nice improvement. That looks once again nice and tidy on the exit of turn 16. So going towards the line then for Damien, it will be good enough to send himself up to P21, and that will be the last improvement for anyone in the field. So honours will, in the end, go to Gasper Mrak in the Honda. First Honda pole position in a very, very long time in AOR as well. And Mr. Jones, valiant effort there from him to get himself into the front row of the grid as well in the Aston Martin. Now comes the question, what is the weather going to be for the race? And it is even worse than in qualifying. My goodness, this is full rain conditions, and I'm sure there's a few hearts sinking there on that grid at the moment. And with the chances of changeable conditions, we could see a very, very interesting race develop for the Tier 2 grid tonight. This is going to be wonderful. So in the end, it was Gasper to get pole position in the number 88 Honda. Brilliant effort there from him. Also checking out the weather. There we go, 30 minutes time, it will be dry. So very, very interesting series of events that we're likely to have, because with a wet to dry race, how do you play the strategy? How long do you take the wet tyres? How do you tune the setup? Do you take a full wet setup? Do you take a full dry setup and just try to get it to that point later on in the race? There's a full hour of driving for these guys, and there's that little bit of ambiguity between the 10-minute to 30-minute mark of exactly at what point we're going to have dry racing. So we might see a few gambles on that front, but starting in the best place possible, Gasper Mrak in the 88 Honda starting on pole position. Mr. Jones in the Aston Martin starting in P2. Brilliant effort there from him. David Gavon in the Bentley may not be the strongest in this opening phase of the race, but maybe when it goes to dry conditions, that might be a car to watch challenge for the front. Benjamin King, our lead Audi. So we've got 4 different manufacturers in the first 4 spots. Brilliant to see that. So, and a great effort there from Benjamin King. Last season was up from Tier 4 to Tier 2. Retained Tier 2 position going into Season X. And much, much more competitive effort there from him than previously. So brilliant job there from him. Uros Yelenko had strong pace but wasn't quite able to put it together. And will start in P5 with this man, Yogok, right behind him in the SpongeBob, beautiful SpongeBob livery Audi there. And clearly good pace in that car as well, but not quite able to bring it all together when he needed to. Benji McCluskey, our next Bentley on the grid, sitting in P7, followed by Daniel Pashkar in the Lost in Pace Audi, followed by Remy Papin, and then rounding out the top 10 will be Jack Young in the BMW, and the first BMW of that, which when you consider the amount of drivers that were using it last season, very, very different situation to what we have seen before. So P11 then, Jordan Watson in the Ferrari, one of only a couple of Ferraris in the top tiers. Christian Steinhauser then P12 in the RSR Bentley. Sem Smeets starting in P13, followed by Trafka. Good effort there from him, and then Robin Moe. So a couple of names there from the BMW series lining up next to one another. Jay Fang, familiar name in Tier 2. He will start in P16. Alessio Mellis in P17. Followed by Remy Rose in P18. May end up getting a penalty after the race and possibly taking that forward into next week at Barcelona. No live stewarding for Tier 2, but I am sure that after that unfortunate error in qualifying, that there will be some sort of form of penalty for that. Wojtek Neuwirth in the number 63 Aston Martin. He'll see that there's the Aston Martin of Mr. Jones sitting up on the front row, and he'll be wishing that he could have found a bit more pace in that car in qualifying. Guillaume Verdier in the 882 Porsche down in P20. Damien Lillian saw himself get up to P21 with that improvement at the end of qualifying. Loris Madiri in P22, followed by Ben Keys in the Nissan GTR. Nissan may be in for a slightly difficult day, potentially. Will be very, very quick on the straights. Nissan has always been a strong car in terms of top speed, but these wet conditions are not going to be too favourable for the 904. Arnaud Rodri will start in P24, followed by Dominique Kourashavin in P25. Mash will start in P26, followed by Alex Rosetta in P27. And we've got Matt York starting in P28. He would have been ruining that qualifying session. And look at the spray. These drivers still only going very slowly at the moment. You can just see visibly the amount of rain that is being kicked up from these cars already. So that is going to be very tricky for lap 1. James Cowley in P29, followed by Andre McClear in P30. And we've got Andre Verona in 31st, with Ola Pitchik in 32nd. Ola not quite managing to get the pace out of that Audi that we've seen him extract from cars in Tier 2 before, so maybe taking a little bit of time to get up to speed with the Audi then. New car coming from the Bentley and a very different one of that. Jukka Terminen in 33rd, followed by Frank Spike in the number 92 Porsche, with Just Haverman in 35th behind him. Jan Climbs in 36th. Then we've got Saeed Mohammed Javad Tabatabayina in 37th, and then Clement Gogaud and Patrick Adamczyk in 39th, and rounding out the grid in 40th, Jean-Michel Brin in the 21 Lamborghini. So, and again, only a couple of Lamborghinis on this grid as well, so be interested to see how they get on, and these wet weather conditions very unlikely to be favourable for them, so maybe a long day for those drivers, but the tension building towards the start of this race. And having a look at the chat as well, seeing some support for some drivers. We've got Yogurt go faster please. I'm sure that Yogurt definitely would have been wanting to improve on his position in qualifying. Clearly has strong pace, will be looking to do so in the race. We've got some cheering for Adamczyk as well, the RSR team, good to see, and some other drivers as well. And Tim, my beloved co-commentator, unfortunately can't join tonight. Yes, indeed, very different weather, and I'm sure a very different race about to unfold. Hopefully these guys manage to keep it clean in the opening lap. And I hope I haven't commentator cursed that one too much, but these drivers making their way towards the line. We will go to the helicam because I expect potentially a lot of action in this opening sector and opening lap. But the first race then for Tier 2 of Season X is green lights away then, and it's a good start from Gasper to cover off the inside line going in towards turn 1. I don't think Mr. Jones is going to be able to challenge that unless he can go all the way around the outside. No, and the Bentley of Gavon trying to go out the inside and see if he can make his way up into P2, but then the outside switches over again once more, and Mr. Jones will hold on to that position. Who gets brilliant drive. Oh, there's contact for the Audi in the background there. I think that was Benjamin King that got pushed around. We've got other yellow flags going on further down the order as well. There's several cars around in the background. The 882 car I can see is one of them on the grid. We've got more cars coming together in the opening series corner. I think that's Remy Rose that has been pushed wide. So we'll check out up ahead as the timing board has a complete meltdown for just a moment. So we've got McCluskey that's dropped down. We've got some other cars as well that have dropped down. Mash, the biggest loser out of everybody, But looking further up, we've got Gasper still holding on to the lead for the time being as they head towards turn 10. With Mr. Jones putting him under all sorts of pressure for the time being. So unfortunately, we did have one major casualty in that opening lap. Looks like there was a few offs as there's pressure already being applied to David from Chris's Yogurt. Seeing if he can use that Audi, or as he might actually get a possible move down in towards turn 14. That'd be brilliant if he can make that one stick. It's going to be very, very close on the exit of the corner. Yogo trying to squeeze out David. The Bentley still keeping a nose in there as they go into 15. Side-by-side action there. Brilliant stuff by Finn. Yogo will get it done and sweeps around the outside into into turn 16, excuse me, to take the P3, excuse me. We've also got a 717 car at the back of the field, who has gone around. Who is that in 717? That is Remy, and I think Remy is just unfortunately disconnected from the session there, so not sure what happened to them. But Gasper managing to hold on to that position for the time being. What else have we got going on in the mid-pack as we have a lot of cars very, very close together? We've got several cars diving into the pits as well. We've got Votek, Neuwirth, Andre McClare, and Benji McCluskey all going into the pits. Mash has come into the pits now as well, and then obviously the retiree of Remy Rose. Didn't quite see what happened to them. I think some other cars have been caught up in some shenanigans early on as well, potentially. We've got Verona and Madiri, who have dropped back a little bit in the order. We'll see what else is going on up the front. Gasper still holding on to the front position and hasn't been closed in too much just yet from Mr. Jones, but these two making a little bit of a breakaway from the Audi behind. Let's see what else we've got going on in the mid-pack. Ben Keys trying to put some pressure on to Jack Young up ahead. I think Ben Keys has maintained his previous position. Doesn't look like he will be able to do anything just yet. We've got some cars getting very, very close together down this backstretch. We've got Rosetta and Frank Spike as the 17 car. Who is that? That is Yurashilenko, who's gone off, and that's I think that's Mash has maybe gone off wide as well in the background. That's number 3 car, but Yurashilenko has gone off the circuit. How did Uras lose it? Unfortunately, taking the wrong part of the replay there. Didn't quite see how that one came about. But very, very tricky series of corners is 12 and 13, and in these wet conditions it is extremely treacherous indeed. So disaster there for Euros in the number 17 Honda. As see, where else have we got battles going on? I think we've got a bit of a duel going on with Remy Papin and Frank Spike. I think Frank Spike may have dropped potentially a little bit. They were on the gearbox of Rosetta a moment ago, so Frank has lost a little bit of time there. Who's that going wide? I think that might be Mash letting everybody by, as he has, so that will be that. But looking back up towards the lead then, Gasper is maintaining that lead, but Mr. Jones is looking very, very feisty in the Aston as yellow flag out for the number 3 car. Again, that is Mash getting out of the way of everybody there, possibly in a slightly more dramatic fashion than need be. Is facing the right way, but I have a feeling maybe have had a spin in there. But Yogurt now using the grunt in the Audi to actually put pressure on to Mr. Jones into the final part of this circuit. And again, may actually make the same move he did on the Bentley, and it may be even easier than last time. Down the inside, Mr. Jones will fight it, but I don't think it's going to be enough of his car alongside. And Yogurt gets through into P2. A brilliant move from the SpongeBob liveried Audi there. And it may not be the most serious of liveries, but Yogurt is taking this driving and the race very seriously indeed. We saw in qualifying that he has strong pace in that car, and even in these wet conditions, that Audi is looking extremely quick at the moment. Fastest lap honours for the time being still going to Mr. Jones. Reason being is because both of our top 2 drivers haven't actually set a valid lap. So we saw the track limits in yesterday's race did come back to bite some of the drivers later on. And it is very tricky around Misano to not get a drive-through penalty. In the wet conditions, it's not likely these guys are going to be taking as much advantage of the curbs as they would typically in the dry, but they will, of course, be looking for every single advantage that they can get. And an interesting balance as the way that these cars progress through the sectors. You can see the Yogurt being put under a little bit of pressure there from Mr. Jones, but through turn 10 seems to be very, very fast and has a lot of straight line speed. And number 97 car, we've got a yellow flag. Who is that? I think that is Jack Young, as the number 6 car in the background is off as well. That is Remy Papin that has gone off at turn 10. So what happened to those guys? So think battling with Smeets there. Young going towards the inside. Oh, as they get caught up in the braking zone. Smeets send around, and then what happens to Remy Papin just afterwards? See if we can find Remy on the leaderboard. Unfortunately, I can't find their name. See, very, very deep into the gravel though. But unfortunate contact there on the entry towards turn 10 as they got a little bit too close for comfort. As looking back up towards the front, Gasper was the fastest out of the top 3 on the last lap. Not by much, just a few hundredths in this point of the race, and the rain already beginning to potentially drop off. 10 minutes time it will be dry, so we're looking at almost potentially 3/4 of the race then being dry. So it will start to be very interesting in a few moments time how these drivers start to think about their tyre strategies and how late do you look to pit, because if you pit too early for the dry tyres, you'll take a lot of wear out of them in the early phase of the dry stint, and then you'll have no grip to work with. So you might have to stretch out these wet tyres for quite a while longer. Mr. Jones, although being passed by the Audi of Yogurt a couple of laps ago, has definitely not said goodbye to this potential P2 spot. Fastest lap of the race though goes to a fellow Audi of Daniel Pashkar, who finds himself up in P5 at the moment. Where is David Gavon? David Gavon has dropped down the order, maybe having a moment a couple of corners ago, and has dropped down to P8. So where did Gavon lose that time? So you can see he's in front of Pashkar for the moment. Is it into turn 10? Oh, goes very, very wide on the entry. Very similar. Oh, and then actually gets a little bit eager on the throttle to bring the car back around, loses some extra time. Still a fairly swift recovery, but many, many positions lost there from the Bentley. So not ideal for David whatsoever. The way that the car actually drifted into that turn was very similar to the sort of mistake we saw from Max Verstappen at Barcelona the other day. Obviously very different reasons for that, as in the meantime Yogurt is very much hunting down the Honda ahead. Gonna go on board with Yogurt and see what it's like in the Audi. Much more aggressive with the apex curb going through turn 6 and then down this back straight. What's the straight line speed difference looking like? Pretty even in the toe down this back straight as they head towards turn 10. See how much time can Yogurt gain through here. Oh, gets a little bit too much of the apex, and see, just pulls the car around. You want to get onto it a little bit, as it really does get you through there quickly. But the Audi has always had... Oh, there's a big lock up there from Yogurt, and he's lost the back of the car entirely. And off the track he goes, and that's going to allow Pashkar through, and he will drop down to P4 then. So pushing on hard, but then making a mistake in towards turn 10. Very, very similar to what we saw David Gavon just do, and I am very sorry, Yogurt. Potentially that onboard not doing you too much justice, as Pashkar making a mistake into 12 and 13. Does manage to get it pulled up though, and will maintain the position, but you can see these drivers struggling in these changing conditions. And now, according to the weather map, these are... Sorry, no, they're not dry conditions, of course, but the rain has now stopped, so we will start to see this race dry up over the next few minutes. So how long is it going to take for this track to become drivers. A lot of drivers on the circuit, which will help out massively in making it a bit faster. Track temperature at 29 degrees, so maybe not the strongest of heat to get this water off the track, but you'd have to think that perhaps in the next 10 to 15 minutes that this might start to get to the point where drivers consider whether or not they will want to go for dry tyres. Further down the order, I think I saw Matt York going side by side with somebody further down. If I can find Matt on the grid, there we go, right behind the Nissan of Ben Keys, and then just behind him is Benjamin King, who had that off on the very first lap and is trying to recover his way through the pack if he can, but not able to do anything just yet. Matt York holding on to the P13 spot. Also, in the meantime, Ola Pitchik in P15. Brilliant recovery drive so far from further down the order, and has currently got the honours for fastest lap. So brilliant stuff there from him to see if he can get a strong result from this one. In the meantime, I have noticed that Trafka, the number 7 car, is no longer in the session, so not sure what happened to Trafka. Oh, Benjamin King has gone wide, and so is Ben Keys up ahead. That's a huge moment for King as he will try to recover the car, hopefully rejoin safely through there. Does a very, very good job of making sure that he doesn't collect anyone on the exit of turn 12. We'll be side by side now, fighting with the 92 Porsche, and will look to hold that position, but King's day goes from bad to worse, as then there's side-by-side action. Just behind that is Papin, I believe, in the background, going alongside Anna Rodri, and Remy will get the move done heading towards turn 1, but disaster for King. We saw Keys go off there on the exit of 12 as well, so you can see really struggling even with the rain having stopped coming down. Maybe these tyres starting to get a little bit too hot, go a bit too much over pressure, and making it even trickier than before to keep these cars on the track. Are now looking very, very racy indeed. We've also got a driver coming into the pits, have we? Andre Verona, I can't click on their car, so I think that's another retirement, unfortunately, there for the 402 car. We'll have a look further up the order. Oh, what was that penalty that I saw further down? Clement Gogaud, our first victim of a drive-through penalty there. And, oh no, Mr. Jones! Mr. Jones with a drive-through penalty. It's a disaster for the Aston Martin drivers. He's then gone wide on the exit of turn 12. Pashkar may be able to reel him in and make a potential move for P2, but realistically, that is the Aston Martin's race absolutely done, and he will serve that penalty straight away. And unfortunately, because of the timing with the weather, that it wouldn't have actually made a difference realistically, because he wouldn't have been able to change his tyres. So serving that that drive-through penalty straight away, but Mr. Jones just pushing a little bit too hard behind Gasper to try to close in on the Honda, and unfortunately losing out disastrously. So that gives Gasper a huge amount of breathing room for the time being. But you can see only 15 minutes in, we've already got 2 drivers that have got drive-through penalties. So this could be a huge factor in this race. In the meantime, down in P16, new honours for fastest lap goes to this man of Dominic Koroshavin, another Audi. So the Audi's looking pretty quick in race pace, but also a little bit treacherous to drive at various points in time. We'll have a look and see what other battles we've got going on. We've got Frank Spike still trying to defend from Arnaud Rodri behind, and then that is also James Cowley trying to get involved in this one as well. I think Arnaud has got a very, very good run going down this back straight, and the Porsche is going to be vulnerable going in towards turn 10. Arnaud going down the inside. You can see both cars a little bit battered and bruised, but I think the 200 car will get that one done, unless Frank is able to use the acceleration on the Porsche on the exit, but I don't think so unless it's a late dive towards turn 10. Oh, Aston Arnold's gone off, and that will potentially allow the Porsche back through, and he will get through onto the back straight there, but the McLaren likely to come back in the drag race towards 12 and 13, and how brave do they feel? You can see the sun is definitely coming out, the track temperature's going up, but the racing is just as hard as it was before, and Arnold I don't think is going to be able to make anything happen at this moment in time, and Cowley may even think about an opportunity going towards turn 14. Unable to do anything at this moment in time, but a great three-way tussle there for P20. Once again, AOR showing it doesn't matter where on the grid you are always likely to have a very, very intense battle in these tiers. That's allowed Spike just ahead to break away as that train starts to create some gaps. In the meantime, a gap that's closing. Oh, maybe a late move into turn 2. Not quite. Thought Damien Lillian there was going to go up the inside, as then right behind him we've got Benjamin King, who has done a couple of recovery moves already, thinking about a move towards turn 4. Not quite. And we'll have to wait for another moment. There's Papin not far behind as well. I think Remy Rose we've lost in this race as well. I'm not sure exactly what moment that happened. Can King do anything about the Porsche just then? You can see how quickly that dry line has developed. In the background, though, we have got Spike still defending from Rodri. But it doesn't look like Arnaldo's going to be able to make a move just yet. See also Mr. Jones, that's where he has come out down in 23rd position. So a long, long way to go in this race. As always, a big moment for Mr. Jones. Does a brilliant effort to hold that one together. But a big lockup on the rear axle for that car, and ends up with a huge four-wheel drift through there. See some flashing lights. We've got Jay Fang. And who is that is next to Fang? I think that car might be a lap down. I'm trying to see the number. I think it was a 30-something. Can't quite see who that was. It was flashing over the lights there, Fan going a little bit deep. That is the 46 car. So who is in number 46? That is Saeed Mohammed Javad Tabatabaina in that car. And does appear to be a lap down, so maybe feeling like he has stronger pace than the McLaren ahead, but Jay Fang not getting out of the way just so you can see visibly the McLaren having suffered some damage earlier on in the race. Matt York close with somebody on track as well. That is Koroshavin, who previously was the driver holding the fastest lap of the race. That honours has gone back to Pashkar, who is looking to try to hunt down the Honda currently leading this race of Gasper Marak. Gained 0.3 of a second on the last lap. He's got about 1.5 seconds still to find, but in these changing conditions, very much can see anything happen. We've got another car that's pitted. That is Clement Gargaud that's serving their drive-through penalty. Matt York, though, going a little bit wide on the exit of turn 10 then, and Dominic Koroshavin may be thinking about making a move. Oh, it's going to be very, very tight to go side by side. Oh, contact! Contact already, Matt Young. How did he save that? I thought he was a complete goner as they went through there, and then still line astern into 12 and 13. And once again, brilliant car control from Matt York with an absolutely terrifying moment down the back straight. And he will hold on to that position. Just have a look at this once more. My goodness, Matt York with absolutely lightning reflexes as they were heading towards that kink. It's such a fast kink, and you see, oh, that was a lovely camera shot through there as he actually was drifting over the apex. I think actually the contouring of the circuit helped Matt keep that one on the track as well as he drifted across the inside of the circuit. Hopefully didn't get a corner cutting warning on the back of that, because my goodness, anything, he should get a trophy for holding on to that car there. That was brilliant stuff. Now, in the meantime, the times are absolutely tumbling. A 41.6 on the last lap there from Daniel Pashkar, fastest lap of the race, and 0.6 of a second faster than anyone else. Now, the 881 car, that is Clement Gargaud, yellow flag, and retiring from the race. We've got another drive-through penalty for Just Haverman in the 33 Audi, so unfortunate for them, and their day goes from bad to worse as well. but Gasper now starting to struggle in these conditions as goes a little bit deep into turn 14 there. And Daniel right now certainly looking a lot more comfortable in this transition from wet to dry. Still not likely to be ready just yet to go to slick tyres, but you can see visibly how much the dry line has developed. And would you believe it, in 30 minutes time we're going to get rain again. So, it's not even over just yet. These guys will, of course, have to go for dry tyres for a portion of this race. But in the final stages, we are going to have another wet shower with about 10 minutes left on the clock. So, brilliant action is going to be seeing this one all the way through and could be changing at every single minute. And Daniel Pashkar, in the meantime, consistent as you like, last 2 laps within 0.005 of a second of one another and consistently faster than the Honda ahead. Christos Jogok has not quite been able to hold on to these two at the very front of the pack. Jogok having a couple of moments himself. Gasper then I think went a little bit wide through turn 8 there, but able to hold on to it for now. The Bentley of McCluskey just up ahead. Let's see how much drive Daniel gets out of turn 10 there. Hop on board. Let's see what sort of pace difference we've got down the back straight between these cars. So the Audi obviously in the tow for quite a while as they head through the flat kink of 11 and then this very tricky section of 12 and 13. How many corrections does Daniel make? Very smooth on the inputs there. Very, very nice. And the Honda of Gasper, not so much, has gone deep at turn 14. As drive-through for Watson. So the driver in 4th place in the Ferrari, who's done a brilliant effort. Jogok as well! Oh my goodness! With 37 minutes on the clock, and Jogok immediately going to come into the pits. I hope he hasn't carried in too much speed there. Looks like a very fast entry. As in the meantime, the top 2 have swapped around. So what has happened in the last couple of corners? So we saw Gasper go a bit deep into turn 14. He didn't immediately give an opportunity to Daniel, but what happened in these next couple of corners? Goes very, very wide through 15, and Daniel has a sniff up the inside into 16, side by side as they went through there, and Pashkar able to get much more traction on the exit as the Honda was all caught up on the exit curve and snatches the lead away from the Honda that is led from the start. So brilliant racing from there, and another drive-through penalty further down the order. Robin Moe in the number 113 McLaren has got no drive-through, so a flurry of drive-through penalties then, and there's so much more time with this race left to go, so that is a huge, huge factor. And poor Watson in the Ferrari had really snuck up the order out of nowhere to see himself into P4, but has plummeted down the order as expected on the back of that. Replaced though with another Ferrari of Alessio Mellis in the Porsche Spinala team. A slight contradiction with the manufacturers there. As you can see, a lot of these drivers moving over to the right-hand side of the circuit there. Now, clearly off the racing line, but look at them all weaving down this back straight. They're trying to cool the tyres using the surface water on the track to bring the temperatures down because the track isn't quite ready for dries. But these wet tyres will be screaming in these conditions. So really trying to get as much longevity out of these wet tyres as they possibly can. David Gavon, in the meantime, under pressure from Ben Keys, who's doing a brilliant job in that Nissan GTR, up into P7 for the time being, capitalising on other people's mistakes at the moment and driving very, very nicely indeed. Pashkar has managed to gain another second over Gasper Merak in that battle for the lead and sets the fastest lap of the race on a 1:40.760 and is clearly faster than anybody else currently on the grid. So a brilliant effort there from him so far as he looks to try to get himself into a very commanding position at this dry-ish sort of phase of the race. And see, the track conditions have switched to damp. They'll go to one stage further before going to dry. They'll go through greasy and then we will be at dry. Also another driver with a huge comeback, Ola Pitchik, started so far down the order up into P8. So a brilliant effort there from the Team Baus Ukraine car. There's a very lovely and supporting livery, of course, of Pitchik's home country. And I'm sure everyone in the stream chat as well, thoughts with Ukraine too. As looking back up ahead, Daniel Pashkar is continuing to extend his lead ahead of Gasper Marak, as I think Marak is on a faster lap than what he was last time around, but just not on the same level as what Daniel is doing at the moment. What sort of pace is it from the Audi? Very consistent once more, 40.795, and Marak not even within half a second, so the Audi really coming into its own at this point in the race. I'm sure Jogurk is ruining that mistake from earlier to get the drive-through penalty. See how he is getting on, stuck behind Frank Spike now, as he will be looking to recover some positions as well. There was some action going on just a little bit further ahead, maybe side by side towards turn 1 with Remy Papin and Jack Young. I've also got Pitchik under pressure from a recovering Joros Yelenko. Joros making a mistake of his own earlier on and seeing him drop down the order. Young managing to hold on to his position for the time being, and now Jogurk seeing as maybe under pressure for Roderick, trying to defend from Watson. So Watson, having served that drive-through penalty, was up in P4. And of course, it will be much faster of the two, but unable to find a way past just yet. But Jogurk now maybe sensing an opportunity down towards turn 8. Does he think about a late dive? I think he will. Frank sees him, and they're going to be side by side through the apex, and Jogurk will make that one work and see himself climb back up to P16. So clearly very far away from where he once was in this race, but is gaining positions nonetheless. In the meantime, we've got some interesting juggling about. We've got Steinhauser. So Steinhauser's just appeared in P3. Now, did that happen during some of the drive-through penalties and I've missed it, or something more? I didn't see any yellow flags come about, and I have we got anyone in the pits that was around there? I don't think so. So Steinhauser looks like he's just been lapping very consistently and cleanly to see himself get up to P3, so a good effort there from him as our first proper pit stop happens, and it is David Gavon who is going to come into the pits now and switch over to dry tyres. You can see the weather has gone to greasy now. How much of a gamble is this then for the Bentley driver? Has already had some mistakes in the wet stages of the race earlier on, so we'll have to see whether or not this early pit stop for dry tyres does in fact pay off. Matt York is continuing to come under a bit of pressure from Koroshavin behind. I think the closest battle we've got on track at the moment, though, is this one between Alessio Melis and Sem Smeets. Smeets is gaining pretty quickly over these last couple of laps, gained 7/10 of a second on the last one, and is looking very, very racy indeed. We'll hop onto the rear wing of the 51 McLaren and see, Ferrari, and we'll see how much time does that McLaren gain down the back straight. McLaren usually a pretty fast one in a straight line, but the Ferrari is no slouch either. You see he's gaining just a little bit as Alessio taking a slightly different line through those couple of kinks, and Sem Smeets gaining some on the brakes as well, maybe able to set up a slightly better exit. Does look like he has got the stronger pace out of these two drivers, and we'll see what it's like on board with Sem as well. A lot more confident getting in towards the apex of turn 16. A little bit scruffy exit there for Alessio, heading towards turn 1. Maybe a dive coming out of the McLaren as they head towards turn 1. Sem Smeets late on the brakes, maybe a little bit too late. Is he going to get pulled up? But he does. I thought he absolutely missed that entirely, but he gets it stopped beautifully and absolutely gaps Alessio in the meantime. So a brilliant, brilliant send there from the number 95 car. In the meantime, we've got Jogurk who has set the fastest lap of the race, and interestingly enough, that is still on wet tyres. Jogurk has not pitted. Now, the driver to look at, where is David Gavon? David, last lap. So last lap, he had just come out of the pits, I believe. Did 150 on that last lap. I not sure if that was a genuinely representative time. He's actually still got his wipers on. I'm not sure he knows how to turn them off. It has stopped raining for David, so maybe adding a little bit of distraction, as Neuwirth has also done a pit stop as well and is ahead of him. So Neuwirth was in a very different position before any pit stops took place, and yet somehow is ahead of the Bentley drivers. A huge kick of oversteer for the 108 cars, and just about manages to hold on to that one. Now, what are the lap times of these drivers? So these two, that was their out lap, so we'll get a representative time next time around, as we'll look a little bit further up. Juris Jelenko, I think, has managed to get past the Audi then of Ole Pitchik, so the Honda getting back up into P7 on their recovery. We've also got Damien Lillian under pressure from Jogurk now, going through 15-16. That's a huge amount of curb from Jogurk. He'll give him the inside line, as the Damien actually looking to pit anyway, but I would not be surprised if that maybe gave a warning to Jogurk, who has already suffered a drive-through penalty this race already, so he has to be careful about how much he pushes on. In the meantime, we've also got Steinhauser. That's a lapped car behind Steinhauser, hence the gap, as Ola Pitchik and Matt York going side by side through turns 4 and 5. Brilliant action to give each other space there, and it will be a much better exit for Matt York, and surely that BMW is going to be able to carry momentum down towards turn 8. But no, the Audi just has the extra power, and the BMW not able to do anything about it unless he thinks about a dive. No, he's going to be more patient than that. Matt York, a smart driver generally with what we've seen from him in previous seasons, and he will see if he can make a move elsewhere. But it does look like the tyres on the Audi of Pitchik, they have done a huge amount of work to get him up the order. But right now, the BMW of Matt York, the 65 car, looking much, much faster, and he's also cooling his tyres down at the same time. But you can see the pace difference of the Audi just completely out-drags him down the back straight, and he's nowhere. So the BMW, clearly the better handling car at the moment. Oh, but Pitchik completely off on the exit of turn 12, and Matt York going for a dive, and Pitchik will have to relinquish that one. It was a late dive there from the BMW, but he saw the gap, he went for the opportunity, and he made the move stick. There's also a battle, I think, just behind between Rosetta and Papin. Papin trying to go all the way around the outside of the BMW, and will make that one work. Now, a few more pit stops, and it has officially transitioned to dry, and I'm surprised that we haven't seen more drivers come in, but we've got quite a few. We've got Gasper Murat, Christian Steinhauser, Sem Smeets, Joris Jelenko, Ola Pitchik, Spike coming in as well. Some of these guys further down maybe benefiting from the fact that it's going to be a little bit easier for them to judge, but you can see just the texture of the track does look very, very dry indeed. And the track temperature up at 31 degrees, so it's gained in temperature by a couple of degrees. There's a very, very battered and bruised BMW there of Loris Madiri. Don't know if that was recent, but very much has had a rework on the front of that car, unfortunately, so that's a huge amount of damage for him. Benjamin King under a bit of pressure from Cowley behind. King, a difficult race for him so far as well. A lot of these guys further down the order have done their pit stops, so it's going to be interesting to see whereabouts they emerge. As, who is that just? So is that Pashkar? That is Pashkar. So Pashkar having lapped these guys, and Pashkar staying out then. So is going to do at least one extra lap in comparison to likes of Gasper Mrak. Now, he may be able to afford to do this because these guys going onto the slick tyres, if they do it too soon, they will burn through their tyres very, very quickly in this opening series of laps. And that means that then later on in the stint, they will have very little to work with. So Daniel did have a little bit of extra room to play with in terms of strategy, and I think that is exactly what he's making use of. He's also another one with his wipers still on, but you can see he's visibly struggling. In actual fact, the cars behind are catching him, and this is going to hurt Daniel now because he's effectively going to have to let some of these guys go because they are clearly faster, and maybe Daniel has not made the right strategy because you can see visibly the dry tyres are gaining a huge amount of time over the Audi, and He's optimistically kept his wiper on, still hoping for some sort of form of rain, but that is definitely not coming anytime soon. We've got other drivers coming into the pits now. We've got York, Papin, Young, Jogurk have all just come in, but has Gasper Marak and Steinhauser made the right call potentially going for that earlier pit stop? It's possible that Daniel has mistimed this just a bit. It looks like the track really dried up a lot over these last couple of laps. Ben Keys in Nissan sets the fastest lap of the race. And what lap was that from Ben Keys? A 36.1. And the last lap for Daniel Pashkar was a 41.3. But he continues to stay out because in 10 minutes time the rain's going to come back down. Would you believe it? But the thing is, Daniel still has to do a pit stop. But if it's going to come down with rain, everyone's got to do another pit stop, surely. So, in actual fact, this time that Daniel is losing, he may have had an absolute masterstroke in strategy on staying on these tyres after all. And there's only two other cars that have joined him, Rosetta and Watson. Watson, who served a drive-through penalty, no less, find themselves sitting in the top 3 by a country mile. Because where is Gasper Marak? Gasper Marak isn't even into the final sector yet. So, these drivers that have not taken their pit stop may have just absolutely made the most brilliant strategic call that I've seen in a long time. We saw some fantastic ones from Yonkers last season in Tier 2, but these top 3 drivers, who I'm sure surely with those weather warnings or weather readings on the radar, that they will just stay out. I mean, they're not going to have a great deal of grip on the wet tyres when that rain hits, but everyone on the slicks is going to be suffering, possibly even worse because of all the aquaplaning, and the rain looks like it may come down really quite intensely. So these are going to be difficult laps for these drivers, but that's why Daniel is not too worried about letting some of these back markers go by, because he has a whole pit stop over his next nearest rival. Having a little bit of a look in the chat, we've got so thinking about the strategy, yeah, absolutely. In terms of sort of whether or not the wets are dries or then dries and then going back to wets. I mean, where is Marak? So let's have a look at the lap times once more. So Daniel Pashkar, last lap of 40.8. The previous lap that Gasper did was a 35.6, which wasn't the fastest on the circuit, but was very, very quick indeed. So at the moment, he's gaining about 5 seconds a lap. Now, the rain is going to come down quite intensely within the next 10 minutes time. So these drivers, they're going to have about 7 laps until the rain comes down. So about 7 laps time, Gasper and the other drivers are going to have to theoretically pit. Alex decides to come in. He does not want to risk these tyres ballooning and getting a puncture, which is a concern if the pressures are going a little bit through the roof as well. So maybe just not wanting to lose anything further. So there's going to be about 7 laps left before we have the rain, and at the rate that Gasper is closing, he'll gain theoretically about another 35 seconds potentially. I clicked on the wrong car there. So he'll gain another 35 seconds, but you know, Watson is 35 seconds behind Pashkar, and Marak is a chunk of time behind him. So I'm really not sure that as long as Lee's tyres for Pashkar and Watson last, if they just tiptoe their way around, they've got a lot of time, and particularly Pashkar has got a lot of time at hand to try to make this strategy work. So they've just got to absolutely tiptoe their way around. Just don't hit curbs too hard. Thought Pashkar was thinking of coming in there, but not quite. Maybe he left his wiper on preemptively for the rain. It was maybe an in-car rain dance from the number 77 Audi, but that could be very, very interesting in the next few minutes. In the meantime, though, we've got about a 5-way tussle for P12. Then we've got Papin leading this train. Arnaud Rodri is trying to defend from Damien Lillian, Christos Jogurk, and Mr. Jones. So 2 of the fastest drivers in this race so far, but both getting drive-through penalties as Jogurk goes wide once again. Has to be careful not to make a mistake. I think that was backmarker getting out of the way. Damien Lillian now very strong under brakes, but Jogurk getting very, very nicely tucked into the apex of turn 10 there. Don't think we'll see any change of position just yet, unless the Porsche has exceptional speed, which it doesn't. Actually, the closing speed of Yogurt at the end of that straight was surprisingly quick there, and Damien still not able to make a move on the McLaren up ahead. Oh, Yogurt getting very, very close to the gearbox of the Porsche. You'd sense that there's going to be a move surely very, very soon for P14. We'll hop on board the very wooden rear wing of the Porsche, taking it all the way back to the Beetle days. And that SpongeBob Audi, see how much more confident the Audi is going over the curves, is possibly what led to getting that drive-through penalty, but it does gain you a huge amount of time. And does Yogo think about a dive? No, not quite. Maybe just saving a little bit before we get onto this shorter straight, but it might be just enough of a run for the Audi, because he got very good drive through there, and I don't think Damien is going to have much he can look to defend with. Does he think about going to the inside? He's not going to cover it. Yogurt now down the inside. We've seen him make a place up here before. Still side by side. Damien giving a good go around the outside, but it's going to be a drag race towards turn 10 then, as the SpongeBob Audi trying to sweep around the outside. I don't think he'll get that one done. Will get a good launch possibly off turn 10. Not quite. So Damien, after all that, did actually manage to hold on to the position, but that Audi is going to be coming at him thick and fast, as all going side by side in contact through the kink of 11. Yorga going very, very deep towards the inside and almost contact on the apex of 12. Brave stuff there from Lillian to sweep around the outside and hold on to that position. Thought we might see a repeat of the contact between York and I can't remember who else it was involved down there, but just about managing to get through there safely for the time being. I think also there was a swap around between Jack Young and another driver. I think he was fairly close with someone at one point in time, but not quite just yet. Yogurt has dropped back a little bit, so won't be able to do anything just yet. Now, checking back in on how the battle for the lead is playing out. 42.2 on the last lap. That was actually 6/10 slower than what Watson managed to do in the Ferrari sitting in P2. As you can see visibly how much Pashkar is struggling, and Gasper Mrak on the last lap, a 34.890. So he's now gaining about 7 seconds a lap. So he is gaining more and more as the tyres fall off. In actual fact, that is the battle for P2, as Gasper Mrak going to try sending it down toward the inside, and on the wet tyres, Jordan Watson has nothing to fight against. You can see the difference in traction visibly as Gasper just fires himself out of turn 14 there and gets himself up into P2. And we'll see what the gap is as he comes across the line. What is the gap to Pashkar? If the game would actually like to update it, that's going to be the one gap it doesn't update, isn't it? Well, that's fantastic news. So Gasper is, I would imagine, around the 30-second mark away from Pashkar now. So Pashkar is all the way down towards turn 10. So that is still a huge amount of track that Gasper's got to try to recover there. Only gained 5 seconds on the last lap. I say only in comparison to the previous lap where he gained 7. But less than 10 minutes now until the rain starts to come down. If Pashkar can just hold on to these tyres, he's doing a great job of maintaining the pace that he has had so far. The Bentley of McCluskey behind him. Has McCluskey pitted? McCluskey hasn't. So McCluskey hasn't pitted either. So that is why McCluskey hasn't been able to get past. In the meantime, unfortunately, Tabatabaina has got a drive-through penalty in the number 46 Porsche. So unfortunate there for him. Pashkar then, what was his last lap? A 43.0, so that's another 2 seconds down on his previous lap, and you'd have to imagine that Gasper now unleashed after getting past Jordan Watson. Where is Jordan? You see how much further back he is. Now Steinhauser now trying to get past him as well. So Steinhauser has also been lapping quickly, and the traction difference trying to go around the outside of turn 15, and I think he'll be an easy one. Watson's just got nothing to fight with here, and Watson's bailing. Watson is going into the pits. Now, surely he doesn't decide to go to the wet tyres for this pit stop, because although it's going to be disastrous for him to have to make another pit stop. Oh my goodness, would you believe it? The rain is just coming down. Watson, make sure you've got those tyres selected. The number 30 car has gone off. That is Lillian. That has gone off at, I think that is turn 12. So what happened there? He was battling with Yogurt and Mr. Jones. So they were going side by side by the looks of it through 11. We saw a bit of bumping here between them before. And they came into turn 12. Was there contact? Oh, a thing on the apex, and it wasn't. Yogok went off as well. Oh, and Mr. Jones collected him. Yogok was able to hold the car a little bit better and recover quicker, but a lot of contact between those cars. And now the rain comes down, and that is Pashkar's dream result. But the biggest question in my mind, Jordan Watson came into the pits. I sincerely hope that he had the wet tyres selected, because that is almost, not quite I would say, but almost perfect timing for him. I think he either gambled on the rain coming down at that moment, or he was bailing for the dry tyres, worried about a puncture. But I sincerely hope that he had those selected. Now, this is what Pashkar needs for his race and strategy to survive. He is the only driver now, I think, other than McCluskey potentially. Yet McCluskey's still out there on the wet tyres, on the tyres he started on as well. So that could help him jump up the order. Benjamin King has come into the pits as well, so presumably going on to the wet tyres as well. And Pashkar, huge slide on the exit there of turn 6. So even though the rain is now coming down, it is still definitely not very easy conditions, because these tyres are over 45 minutes old and they are still going to be suffering. They'll be getting cooler and they'll be working theoretically better, but they are going to be suffering dearly, and the rain is really coming down. Jack Young gets a drive-through penalty, so that is very unfortunate for his race. And now everyone else starting to make their pit stops, and Gasper Marak, you see on the slick tyres, he is going to have to be tiptoeing his way around as well, and surely he will look to come into the pits. But the rain has really come down hard, and it's going to get even harder in the next 10 minutes. So this is not a brief shower. This is going all the way to the end of the race, and Daniel Pashkar may have pulled off one of the most brilliant strategies that we have seen in a long time in AOR. Does he decide to come into the pits this time around? Because those tyres are surely going to be absolutely screaming. He stays out, would you believe it? McCluskey is going to come into the pits now. Also on the Delta, Marak got within 17 seconds of Daniel Pashkar, but the pair of them are going to obviously have to make another pit stop. Pashkar because he has to by the rules, and Marak because surely he cannot survive on the slick tyres, but he doesn't want to come in too early. He's deciding to stay out on those dry tyres. What about Steinhauser? Steinhauser does the same. So an interesting mix of strategies still going on, because we've got drivers on slick tyres. They're going to look to try to go to the end of the race. They're going to look to try to survive this one, I think, to the end of the race, because just over 10 minutes to go. That's only about 7 or 8 laps. Will the likes of Daniel Pashkar has to make another pit stop. He has to. By regulation, he will have to make that pit stop. But the likes of Marak and Steinhauser, they are, I think, going to try to get to the end of the race on these dry tyres. But, well, we may have seen a big deficit of the dries to the slicks previously, but I don't think, with this level of intensity of the rain coming down, I just can't see it being possible to have the same sort of pace as those on the wet tyres. I mean, last lap round from Marak was a 141.5. Now that's on the slick tyres that have been surviving fairly nicely. Daniel Pashkar on wet tyres that he has been on since the start of the race was on a 144.5, so he was still slower on that last lap, but you'd have to think it's going to continue the swing in favour of the wet tyres as they make their way around. Oh, is Daniel going very, very wide? He gets a drive through! Disaster! Disaster for Daniel Pashkar. He's potentially thrown the race win away. Absolute disaster after pulling off what may have been one of the best strategy calls in AOR. Has thrown it away with 10 minutes left to go, and will have a drive-through penalty to serve. Absolute disaster for the 77 Audi, and he will be gutted about that as Gasper Marak now goes up into the lead of the race on slick tyres, with Steinhauser sitting in P2 behind him. So an absolute disaster for the Audi driver then. Where's he going to emerge? He's going to emerge in traffic as well, as there's also a penalty for James Cowley. Stop and go 30-second penalty for him and Tabatabaina for speeding in the pit lane. But Pashkar, he was obviously on the brink of getting a drive-through for a while by the looks of it, as I think it's Terminen and Spike going side by side there through that opening series of corners. Terminen backing out of the way. Oh, kick of oversteer for Pashkar, but that is potentially game over for him, going for the race win. And now, as Smeets has got a drive-through penalty as well. And I think he was one of the drivers that switched over to the wet tyres. So this race is continuing to change every single second. Matt York has come into the pit, so he's going to go for the wets. But the time is ticking for drivers on the wet tyres to try to gain back on those that are now on the slicks. So we'll have to see how that one ends up working out. We've also got Wojtek Neuwirth and Alessio Mellis going side by side towards turn 1. Mellis will hold that position. I think we've also got quite a close battle with Jogurk and Benjamin King. Jogurk recovering from that contact with Lillian and Mr. Jones. Where is Mr. Jones actually? Because he, of course, had quite a disastrous start. He's up into P6. Would you believe it? Mr. Jones, after an absolutely disastrous opening phase to this race, has somehow found his way up to P6. And he'll be driving around with damage at the moment as well. So that is a courageous effort for the number 9 Aston Martin. You see how slippery it is, though. Ola Pitchik has got pressure from Uros Yelenko behind. I think Yelenko diving down the inside. Can he get stopped in time? Very, very close on the exit, but he will get the move done. And it's very difficult to tell which drivers are on wets and which ones are on slicks, and we'll try to gauge it by the lap times once everyone has effectively finished their pit stops. But for the time being, as Daniel Pashkar comes into the pits, but what an unfortunate error there from him. He effectively, I think, had the race in the bag, and he threw it away with 10 minutes to go. He will be absolutely livid with himself after that. Last lap then for Gasper Marak. We know he's on slicks. 148 for him. Steinhauser on a 149.4. We've got Mash, who is a car that's a lap down. So Mash clearly has pitted for the wets, I believe, by the looks of it. As Yelenko now gets a drive-through penalty. So having just made his way past Ola Pitchik, Yelenko gets a drive-through as well. So even in the closing stages of the race, more penalties coming through, more disasters, mistakes and issues for these drivers. Gasper now under all sorts of pressure from that is Jogurk, who's trying to unlap himself. By the looks of it, I think Jogurk, looking at the pace difference, is Jogurk on the wet tyres. We've got Benjamin. He's in a battle with Benjamin King as well, so he's looking to lose no time at all. I'm trying to find one of them as King sends it up the inside towards turn 1 and will get the move done. And that's allowing our race leader to breathe for a moment, but I think by the looks of it, is King. Yeah, he's going to unlap himself here, and that's losing time for Marak. That's not going to be helping him. They're still going side by side, so Gasper really not letting go of this one. That's losing. It's going to be all backing up on the exit of turn 6 there, so it's getting very, very busy as our race leader now finds himself absolutely swarmed by a pack of cars. Yellow flag for the number 33 car. Who is that has gone off? That is just Haberman, as there's another car in the background there. That is the Ferrari, I think. Is that Jordan Watson? Is that Jordan Watson that I spotted in turn 12 and 13 there? Trying to find Jordan, I think it was. He's in effective P13 now, so he's dropped down the order there. He was in P8 with the strategy that he was running, but has not worked for him at all as he tries. Oh, that is Neuwirth that gets wide on the exit of turn 16. And then maybe losing the position to Papin as well. Comes diving down the inside. More drive-through penalties as well as King and Damien Lillian get penalties as well. And number 17 car, yellow flag for them as well. Who is number 17? Yogurk has got another drive-through. Everybody is getting penalties or making mistakes or collisions in this later phase of the race. That is Yelenko that had a moment, I believe. So we had a yellow flag there for Yelenko. What happened to him? Where is this? It's a 12 and 13. Big moment of oversteer. Holds the brakes. Is he going to get collected? As all the cars going either side. I think Yogurt picked up the drive-through from having to take evasive action on the stranded Honda there. So disaster for him and a very, very cruel and unfortunate part of that outcome. Let's see, was that Steinhauser that was also recovering there? I'm not sure. That's difficult to tell. Steinhauser now 6.7 seconds away from Marak. Very, very slidey. And these top guys, 156 for Marak, 152 for Steinhauser. So Marak, lost 4 seconds amongst all of that unnecessary battling with the back markers. And I think our lead car on the wet tyres is Alex Rosetta, who's doing 147s. He's 5 seconds a lap faster than anyone else ahead of him. He's got Jones, unbelievably, with the drive-through penalty. Jones has found his way up to P4. Ben Keys in the Nissan GTR. I thought it'd be a tough day for him. He's in P3. So a brilliant recovery drive from him, and see if he can keep that one going to the end. But Rosetta then, our leading car on the wet tyres. Pashkar, insanely, with the drive-through penalty, has only dropped down to P6. And that shows you how much of a lead he ends up having. It's a big, big slide. You can see he is really pushing hard now, and he must be fuming with himself. There's only a couple of laps left to go. But there is a lot of track to try to gain between himself and Marak. Still very, very slidey. You'd almost think, with the way that he's driving, that he's on slicks himself at the moment. But he is very much on wets, and so is Rosetta ahead of him. But you can see the pace difference now emerging between those on the wet tyres and those on the dries. Marak desperately trying to keep his car going. So 2 laps of this race left to go. A 153 on the last lap there from him. Christian Steinhauser, what did he do? A 53 himself. So these tyres, as they're losing temperature, they're losing pressure all the time, making it more and more difficult to keep it on the track. Ben Keys, a 53.8 for him. Mr. Jones, a 55 last lap. By the looks of it, he's caught up amongst some traffic himself. But what does Rosetta... Oh, Pashkar's through. So when did Pashkar get through on Rosetta? So Rosetta got a bit of a wonky exit through turn 10, and the Audi able to make use of that straight line speed advantage. Is he going to be down the inside to before the kink of 11? That's brave to go side by side through there. Oh, and I think the BMW lifted, and Pashkar left him no room on the outside. He got that move done very early on, as Pashkar pushing on extremely hard, almost losing it through the double apex there, and sees himself climb back up towards P5 as he will continue to surge on. Marak then has started the final lap of... no, he hasn't, excuse me, he's still got half a lap to go. But the engineer giving me slightly misleading information. In the meantime, David Gavon, who had a drive-through, I think, very, very early on, has unfortunately got himself another one. So disaster there for him. But Marak, 53-second lap time on the last lap around. All the drivers on the slick tyres all doing around the low to mid 50s at the moment, whereas the likes of Pashkar, even with battling with Alex, did a 46.0. So how much more time can he gain? He's lapping about 6 seconds faster than the Aston Martin. Jones up ahead, and Jones is really not that far away. You can see the Audi just there in the distance. And you would have to think, with a couple of laps left to go, that there is a very strong chance that potentially Pashkar might be able to bring this back to a P4 spot, which, if he does, would be a remarkable recovery. He'll still be absolutely gutted with himself for that mistake of the drive-through, but he is leaving nothing more on the table. He feels like he has nothing left to lose at this point, and you can see he is closing every single second. We'll have a look at the rear wing, because I don't think it's going to be very long at all before that Audi is all over the back of Mr. Jones. It may even be down towards turn 1. And you can see he's struggling, can't even get the car turned in. And Pashkar's going to surge his way past up to P4. So, with the one more lap to go, I think that might be all he can do in terms of positions, but he's managed to get himself up to P4. Where is Merak? Merak down, coming out the exit of turn 8. Steinhauser not far behind him. Steinhauser has been closing as David Gavon comes in to serve his drive-through penalty. Then I think that's Damien Lillian going past the Bentley there. Obviously on different tyres at the moment, but I don't think there's going to be anything more that Pashkar can find on these wet tyres. You can see how much this strategy would have worked for him if he'd been able to keep it together and not get that drive-through penalty. He'll be absolutely kicking himself. Ben Keys, look at him trying to get the power down. Ben, keep it in a straight line if you can. That Nissan so squirrely. Where is Daniel? Daniel is hunting him down as quick as he can. He gained 15 seconds on Ben on that last lap. But I don't know if he's going to have enough. You see the Audi just going through in the background there. But Gasper Merak is going to come through the final corner after such an eventful race. He started on pole. We thought he'd thrown it away, but Gasper just about manages to hold on with a bit of fortune to take the win of the season opener for Tier 2 of Season X. Steinhauser will take P2. But where is Ben Keys and where is Pashkar? Pashkar's still pushing on as hard as he dares, but I don't think it's going to be enough. Ben Keys in the Nissan GTR of all cars, would you believe? Also, I think the Porsche just behind him has got sent it straight into the wall. I'm not sure who exactly that was, but Ben Keys with an absolutely brilliant effort there from him. We'll see the Nissan GTR climb up to P3. A brilliant show from him, but this man, you've got to feel sorry for him. Daniel Pashkar did everything that he possibly could to recover that win after that mistake. And after such a brilliant effort there, has unfortunately not been able to take the win. And where did Mr. Jones plummeted down the order at the end there? We didn't see that. We were looking at other cars at the time, but the likes of Mellis ended up ahead of Rosetta, so the Ferrari getting up to P5. Rosetta dropped down. Koroshavin went up to P7 and Jones dropped down to P8. So Mr. Jones, after such a strong recovery from him, ended up dropping down the order as well. As I think we've only got a couple of cars left out there at the moment. Robin Moe coming towards the line, and then Yang Climbs, I think, is our last car to potentially finish. But after such an eventful race, we had a completely dry one in Tier 1 yesterday. But Tier 2 gave us rain in quali, rain at the start, dry in the middle, and then a rain at the end to just give us constant action throughout. As Yang Climbs there will be the final finisher there for Tier 2. After what has been an incredibly eventful race. But it was this man, Gasper Merak, that did benefit in the end from that mistake from Pashkar, but he kept a cool head where so many other drivers didn't. We saw Yogurk make multiple mistakes as Gasper plonks it into the wall there to retire the car. We saw Steinhauser also being incredibly consistent. He came up from far down in the order to get P2. And Ben Keys, absolutely delighted, still doing celebrations understandably in that Nissan, because that is a mighty drive to have pulled off in these changing conditions. A car that had frankly no right of being this far up the order. He managed to keep it clean. He stayed out of trouble. And he did exactly what he's not. He did exactly not what he's doing now, of sending it across the grass and spinning around. But yeah, a brilliant show there from him. So a fantastic effort from all of the drivers there on the podium. That was a very strong showing from each of those guys to just remain clean throughout the entire race and see that one to the flag. But it was Gasper Merak that ended up taking honours in the end, as we will see Venki's continuous celebrations into the pit lane and parking it similarly to Gasper in the final stage there. But what an absolutely exceptional race. I said yesterday in Tier 1 stream that Tier 2 Do not write it off because it provides so much action, and we had a tussle throughout the entire race yesterday for the win in Tier 1 yesterday. This time it was more strategy based, but it made it just as exciting all the way throughout and gave us such a great amount of action. It was, though, Gasman Rack to win this first round with Steinhauser P2, Ben Keys in P3, Daniel Pashkar on his recovery drive ends up in P4, Alessio Mellis snatched P5 in the end with Rosetta dropping down to P6, followed by Dominic Koroshavin in P7. Mr. Jones dropping down to P8. He'll be frustrated with how that race ended for him in the end, but still with the drive-through penalty, a good effort there from him. Remy Papin in P9 with Jordan Watson also having a difficult race but finishing inside the top 10. Matt York, a difficult day for him as well, but finishing in P11. Sem Smeets, another driver who was very fast but got some drive-throughs. He finishes in P12. Neuwirth P13. Pitchick in P14. Jay Fang in 15th. With Arnaud Rogerie finishing in P16. David Gavon with that late drive-through penalty will end up in P17 then. Frank Spike in P18. Robin Moe for P19 and Jan Climbs in 20th. And then we had McCluskey in 21st, Jean-Michel Brin in 22nd, I believe. And then the rest of my leaderboard is completely muddled up, and it gets very difficult to work out who finished after that point, unfortunately. But what an astounding first race of the season. So, will we have any potential interviews? Let's see if we can get anybody interested in coming in. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we've got anyone too keen on coming in for an interview. I would have loved it if we could have had either the likes of Gasper or Daniel to come in there. I'm sure Daniel is obviously very, very frustrated at the moment after that race, but it would have been so interesting to hear what it was like from his perspective. That stint in the middle of the race when it was basically bone dry and he kept those tyres alive. He did everything that he needed to do. He was the one man brave enough to stay out on those wet tyres until the rain came back. I think actually alongside Jordan Watson, who may have timed his pit stop rather fortunately to perfection when the rain initially started to come down. But Pashkar did everything that he needed to do, but unfortunately made that mistake later on in the race. Unfortunately, by the looks of it, it doesn't look like we will have any interviews this evening. So that will be it for that one. But Tier 2 providing incredible action as always, and just drama from start to finish. As actually, we may have one driver that has decided to join. Unfortunately, their Discord name gives me no inkling as to who it is, so we just have to ask them, but we shall bring them in. So we have Puff Pirate coming in, apparently. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Fantastic, excellent. I'm afraid that what's your driver's name in the game?
I'm Christian Steinhäuser.
Oh, Christian! Oh, good to see you, mate. P2, obviously, then in that race for you. After, I mean, that was an incredibly dramatic one, wasn't it? Through with the weather changing, the pit strategies, and such a back and forth throughout one. So yeah, give us kind of, what was it like inside the car, trying to kind of judge the strategy and keep it on the track at times, which was just as difficult.
It was insanely difficult, as you say. Like, you really would have wanted a race engineer during this race, because it started wet, obviously, and it was super difficult to drive through the heavy rain. Like, it was really heavy rain. I think nobody really expected it. Like, a lot of cars went off in the fast right-hander, and then I didn't really follow the weather progression, and so I just saw, okay, it's gonna be dry, and then I realized, oh no, it's gonna rain again. But is it now 30 minutes? Is it 20? So I really just tried to follow what the other guys were doing. Like I think one car tried to stick out on wets
He
until
did, yeah. Pashkar, who was a race leader for such a long time, and he effectively had the perfect strategy, but he
yeah.
got a drive-through penalty on the lap that he was looking to pit. He just ran slightly wide on the exit of turn 15, penultimate corner, and yeah, that was the end of his race. He did recover to P4, I believe, in the end, which was quite astonishing considering how short amount of time he had on the wet tires. But yes, it was he almost made it work. It was trust me, from the stream's perspective, it was a big focus and talking point of that race. But yeah, he was the only driver to really try to go for that. And yeah, as you say, you know, the weather was so back and forth, and also the weather readings aren't always the most helpful in ACC, are they? Because you kind of get a very vague idea of, you know, so you know what's happening roughly in 10 minutes and then 30 minutes, but there's that big gap where you're not exactly sure how soon that transition is going to be, and it of course made for a very interesting race from everyone's perspective. And in that closing stage, you know, when you're on the slick tires, same as Gasper, you were edging away into his lead and sort of just closing in a bit, and I think you brought the gap down from around 7 seconds to sort of just over 5, kind of in those closing stages. So how hard were you pushing in that final portion of the race, or was it just about trying to bring it home?
Yeah, both. I kind of just trying to stay on the track, on the black stuff. I was really hard. I tried to brake in the middle of the road because the car started to twitch, you know, and drift into one direction. And once it started to slide on the brakes, you couldn't really correct the trajectory. So when you're heading towards a curb, you're done. So I tried to really bring it home and watch behind, because I knew some cars pitted for wets. But yeah, I didn't think it was worth it, because the pit lane is so long in Misano. So I thought let's stick it out on the dries. I think it was the right decision, but yeah, as you say, it took me a while to realize that I was catching Gasper, but I think it was just not enough. Maybe a few tenths per lap.
Yeah, it was unfortunate. Maybe if there'd been sort of, I think it would have been really interesting if maybe this would be one of our 90-minute races, because that would have given. That would have possibly changed kind of how the strategy worked out a bit, and that kind of transition with the dries to the wets. I think those that maybe then went for the wets later on in the race would have had a bit more of a chance to then try to catch up to those that were running around the dry tyres. But yes, it was pretty tight with the margins at the end there. But you had a fantastic drive through the field to then get a second place position in the season opener, and you know, heading next week into Barcelona. The sort of Bentley, maybe not one of the strongest cars around there, but we've ironically got kind of better predictions for changeable conditions at Barcelona than we did even for Misano. So, you know, how are you feeling going into Spain? And kind of, do you think that if we see the sorts of weather play out that we had today, do you think that might be something you can capitalise on once again?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that's unfortunate that it's a lower rain risk, you know. But honestly, today I was thinking, okay, this is a good track for the Bentley. It's not really a good track for me, but it seems in those conditions it was, so I can't complain. But I was thinking like, now it rains, like it's a Bentley track. It's a bit unfortunate, but it played out perfectly. So let's see, maybe next week the roles are reversed. I think the Bentley is not good and it works. So yeah, but it's definitely a good start to the season. I think one of my best I had so far. So I try to keep the momentum up.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, a couple of seasons back where we were actually racing against each other ourselves, you were very often a front runner of Tier 2, and then last season seemed a little bit more of a struggle than previous, but starting this one very strongly, obviously with that P2 finish, and then hoping to carry that momentum through into the next round. So yeah, brilliant start there from you this season, and and congratulations on what was not just an incredibly difficult drive, but a very well, calmly and executed drive today at Misano. And best of luck next week when you see you there.
Thank you, and hope to see you on track again.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Christian, for coming in for the interview. We appreciate it.
Sure, you're welcome. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks a lot, Christian. Brilliant to hear there from at least one of our drivers and one of our podium finishers that went through that mayhem of trying to live it out on the slick tyres in such treacherous conditions there. But I think that looks like that's going to be it in terms of interviews this evening. No one else looking to show their face, but at least we've had a couple. We've opened up the first 2 streams of Season X with at least having some drivers join in the interview room, which is always nice to see. But that will be it then for this evening and this week in terms of the ACC action from AOR. A brilliant series of opening rounds there for Tier 1 and Tier 2 of Season X then. And as always, if you want to get involved in a community that just loves sim racing, loves motorsport in general, is a very friendly environment, do consider following AOR on Twitter at Apex on Racing, going towards the website if you want to get involved in some of the league racing in particular at apexonline.racing, where you can see all of the leagues that AOR are running at any given point in time and see if you want to dip your toes into some of that, and also consider joining the Discord server as well to chat to some of those that we've seen race over the last couple of days, as well as getting to know other people in the community. It's always great to grow the AOR community even more and building it into a friendly and fantastic sim racing environment. But that will be it then for today. So thank you so much everybody for watching. We'll be back next week for more action of the main ACC League on Monday for Tier 1, and then myself and Tim will be back with the action for Tier 2 on Tuesday, 7:30 British Standard Times on both days, and we shall see you at what will of course be a very exciting Barcelona for round 2 of the season. So thank you everybody for watching, and good night.